Hello, everyone. On this episode of The Squadron, we talked to retired Navy SEAL Commander Jon Macaskill about his journey towards a mindfulness practice and how he has used it to recover from significant experiences from his time in the military. Stay with us. It's a great conversation.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy, running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
I believe we have shots fired. Give me back up now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is The Squad Room.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Squadron Podcast, the place for cops who want to create more resilience, improve their work-life balance, and attack each day with positivity and a passion for the work we do. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Teslau, and if you're a first-time listener, thank you for being here. I'm a full-time sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at The Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure to join our Facebook group. Just search The Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads, and I send out a lot of content that's exclusive to that list, so don't miss out on something that can help you in your life. Join our list at thesquadroom.net. All right, my guest today is Jon Macaskill. Jon is a retired Navy SEAL commander turned consultant and mindfulness and meditation teacher. He has one of the most interesting backgrounds of anyone I've ever talked to on this show. He was born in South Africa, but grew up in rural Louisiana. And Jon was a commander during the famous Operation Red Wings disaster, which was made famous by Marcus Lutrell's book and the related movie Lone Survivor. Jon was actually part of the command staff of that event. After graduating high school, he served briefly as an enlisted sailor in the US Navy, but ended up getting an appointment to the US Naval Academy, and he graduated from there with a BS in mathematics 4 years later. He did tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, off the coast of Somalia, Panama, and after retiring, he briefly served as director of a nonprofit group, but he now co-hosts a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness, which I highly recommend. His goal is to improve cultures and individuals through mindfulness, meditation, vulnerability, and compassion. And those are 4 words: mindfulness, meditation, vulnerability, and compassion, that do not come easy to a type A personality like Jon, or to me, or to probably to you. Jon's journey towards mindfulness and meditation and all those things was rocky, and he talks about it on this episode. It's really great. You'll learn from Jon how he has had to deal with significant survivor's guilt from Operation Red Wings and other activities while he was in the SEAL teams. A simple breathing exercise Jon uses to calm himself and center his mind. And in fact, we go through a mindfulness practice together at the very beginning of the interview, and he leads us through a practice which is very similar to what I do at times, and that he does on his show. And he's setting such a great example for those of us in the, I guess you could say, warrior professions, or the professions that call us to do something bigger and beyond ourselves. Jon is forging a path and helping us come back to ourselves and find some of those things out. And, one of the most interesting things we talked about was, here he is, even as a US Navy SEAL commander, how he struggled or struggles with imposter syndrome. And here's a guy who has done some amazing things in his life and often feels like he's not up to snuff. He's not up to the standard enough. And we talk about that and how that relates in law enforcement. And it's really interesting to see the parallels there and the similarities. But there's so many more amazing lessons that we got from my conversation with Jon. So we're going to thank our sponsors real quick, and then we'll get to our interview with Jon Macaskill. This episode is sponsored by OfficerPrivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information out there that's at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is people can do that same research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. I don't know if you noticed, but it's kind of rough out there. Sometimes that's literally a target, and it's life or death. And other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to those risks. Being careful about what you post on social media, that doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why OfficerPrivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down criminals and evidence on computers and on the internet. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service, the one I use, allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 30 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they will work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they'll remove you again. And here's the thing that other privacy companies don't tell you. You will show up again. It's impossible to keep your stuff off the internet just that one time. It takes constant diligence. That's why their team is so helpful. They do it for you. Now, they also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and technical ability to do it yourself. Using their proprietary software, you can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 30 people search sites on the internet, and then use their software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure you haven't gotten added back yet. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. Jon Macaskill of the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast. Welcome to the squad room, Jon.
Hey, thanks, Garrett. Great to be here. I appreciate it.
I connected with you, as we often do these days, through social media. And was really intrigued by your story and your mission now and everything that I can't wait to get into, because I think we're gonna change some minds today. We're gonna shift some perspectives, maybe shake a little paradigm here or there.
There you go.
But I think part of doing that is helping people, beginning with helping people understand who you are and your background. So if you can give us the bio on where you came from and your sort of your history there.
Sure thing. Yeah. So Jon Macaskill, currently living out in Colorado Springs, retired Navy SEAL. I retired as a Navy SEAL commander. So an 05 for those of you who are outside of the Navy and familiar with other ranks in other services. 05. Served in the Navy for 24 years. 17 of that was in the SEAL teams or attached to special operations in some capacity. And funny enough, we're recording this on June 28th, and June 28th, 2005, I was in Afghanistan and attached to SEAL Team 10. I wasn't actually officially part of SEAL Team 10, but I was augmenting them, and I was attached to them in Afghanistan. And the Red Wings operation was happening. So 16 years ago today, if you've read the book or seen the movie Lone Survivor, that operation was going on right now. And I was friends with many of those guys, and we ended up losing 11 SEALs that day and 8 Army Night Stalkers, and that operation caused me a lot of survivor guilt throughout my time in the Navy. About 14 years of survivor guilt. I'm still battling with it, or at least dealing with it. But in my time, the Navy, they gave me medication to deal with it. And that medication numbed some of the pain, but it also numbed any of the enjoyment that I had in life. And I ended up having some fairly dark thoughts about what I should do with my life, whether I deserve to be here, why I deserve to be here, and those guys didn't. And went and saw some counseling or counselors, And one of the counselors recommended mindfulness and meditation to me. And at first I laughed in his face because I thought that was some woo-woo kind of snake oil stuff that was only for hippies, yogis, monks. And not that I have any problem with any of those, but I didn't fit that mold. And he kind of changed it around for me. He said, well, what if I had something that would help to improve your performance? What if I had something that would help you to improve your focus, your productivity, your creativity, your communication? And as a SEAL, you're always looking for an edge, whether it's an edge over your enemy on the battlefield or an edge over your buddy right next to you. You're always looking for an edge. So I said, yeah, I'll take whatever it is that you're selling there. And he was like, well, it's the same stuff. The mindfulness and meditation will help you with that. So I went home and I downloaded an app and I tried to jump straight into an hour-long meditation, which was a big mistake on my part, and we'll get into that. Yeah. But doing that is much like, lining up at the start of a marathon and never having run a foot in your life. And I felt distracted in that meditation, got frustrated because I was distracted, and then I talked myself into the feeling that I wasn't a person who could meditate. So I went back to the doctor and I was like, hey, that meditation stuff is not working for me. I can't focus, and it's just not giving me the benefits that you had promised. He said, well, that's like going to the gym and getting under 300 pounds on the bench press day one, or like I mentioned, the marathon analogy. And also it's doing it for a couple of weeks is expecting, it's like going to the gym and expecting that you're going to come out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger after 2 weeks, which we all know is not the case. So I went back and I started very simply, started with, 5-minute meditations here and there, and added a couple of those throughout my day so that I would get, 10, 15, 20 minutes of meditation in a given day. And I did that for about 2 months, and I started to see the benefits in my life. And at first I thought it was just me thinking that I was benefiting from it. But then people actually started coming up to me asking me, hey, what are you doing differently? What are you on? They thought that I was on some type of medication that was helping. And I'd actually, in that time, come off my medications that the counselor helped me to come off of. So did the meditation. The meditation helped me to come off of it. And at that point, that's when I knew it wasn't just me thinking that I was feeling better, but I was actually feeling better, and I was performing better. And I was able to process some of the survivor guilt and some of the depression and the anxiety and the stress that I was dealing with. And so I felt that meditation and then living mindfully throughout my day did in fact change my life, and quite literally saved my life. And so I feel now that it's an obligation of mine to pay it forward by teaching as many people as will listen about these practices and about how to live this way. So it doesn't require you to be a hippie or a monk. Again, nothing against those, but you can be anyone and practice meditation and live mindfully. So that's a little bit about me. And then I joined with one of those hippies, Will Schneider, out in New York City. He's a buddy of mine. And he and I started the podcast Men Talking Mindfulness, where we do try to break down the stigma of these practices. And we actually start and end each episode with a very brief grounding practice, so people see that it's not just this crazy woo-woo stuff. I don't know what that noise is, man. I've got all my notifications turned off, so it must be my end somewhere. But anyhow, so that's a little bit about me, man. And I'd love to get into the conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, excellent segue. Well done. Unintentional, but well done, because that's one of the things that I really like about your show is this grounding practice that you do. And I think, I'm part of a men's group that does the exact same thing at the beginning and end of our meetups.
Beautiful.
And find it to be a great experience. It's one thing to do it in your own room. It's another thing to do it where you could open your eye a little bit and make eye, see the guy across from you, look at, being in a room of guys doing it is a different experience, right? It's like a whole other level of vulnerability, really. But I want to share with the audience that grounding practice to give them a sense, for people who maybe haven't meditated, or that maybe they think like you did, of, the hippie and the crystals or whatever. Let's give them a sense of what a simple, not full on meditation episode or session rather is, but just that grounding practice. I'd like to do one with you.
Yeah, man,
I'll do it with
love
you, and
Let's
if you
do
can
it.
guide it, let's get people to give this a shot. So walk us through one.
Perfect. Well, I mean, yeah, let's do it. So first off, before we actually get into it, I just want you to really take stock of where you are mentally, physically, and emotionally right now. So mentally, just we call it an internal selfie. Take that internal selfie of what is running through your mind, your to-do list, some things that may be stressing you out, what's on your day, that kind of thing. Just notice what's on your mind. And then take stock in where you are in your nervous system. Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling calm? Do you feel any stress? And then physically, how do you feel? Do you feel pain? Do you feel any tension? Is that stress that we were talking about before manifesting itself as pain or tension? Now that you've noticed that, we're just going to do some simple breathing and notice what we're doing in the breathing. We're going to do a box breathing exercise where we'll breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, let it go for 4, hold it for 4, and we'll do that 4 times. So 4 box breaths. So let's begin by breathing out all your air. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Breathe out for 4. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. That's 2 breaths. In for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. That's 3 breaths. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. And finally, hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. And now, whether your eyes were open or closed, now take that same stock. Take a look at where you are in your body. Do you feel any pain, any tension? From your body, move to your nervous system. Do you feel that stress? Do you feel a difference in where you were? Maybe that anxiety or stress, tension that you were feeling before in your nervous system has gone away or reduced. And then where you are in your mind. I always picture my mind before I do a grounding practice almost like a snow globe that has been shaken up and all the flakes are flying around. And then after I do the breathing drill, I feel as though that snow globe has been set down and those snowflakes have settled down. So those thoughts, all that noise that is coming in, that's calmed down. Maybe you're not that way, but just notice where you are relative to how we were when we started. And that's a simple grounding practice right there. There's no magic to it. It's very simple. And you can do that even with your eyes open, sitting at your computer, sitting in your car, wherever you may be in your day. And that can really change how your body, your nervous system, and your mind are in that moment and throughout the rest of the day. And you've actually given me a great idea, Garrett. I think I'm going to do that here later again and put that out on social media so people can have that. So thanks for letting me lead that.
That's great, man. Thank you so much for that. I even feel that, I want to touch on a couple things real quick. One is something fantastic you just said, which is, just notice where you are. You don't have to be calm. You don't have to be completely like zenned out, right? But you just notice where you are.
Right.
And that right there is mindfulness, right? It's not
Exactly.
it's not something that's this like really hard to attain constant state of openness that you might think of, like, the Buddha attaining enlightenment. That's not mindfulness. It's just all it is. There's no mystery to it. All it is just knowing where you are, right?
Right. Yeah.
And for us in policing, I think of how, we, from a tactical side, same for the SEALs, but on the tactical side, knowing where you are, right? If I'm fight for my life on the street, I better know what street I'm on, right?
Right.
I better know the address. I better know what cross street I'm near. If my buddy's calling for help, I need to know where to go, but I can't know where I'm going if I don't know where I am.
Exactly.
Our mind is that same way, right? Where we don't know, we can't get to where we want to go if we don't know where we are.
Right.
And,
right. Yeah.
And
that's
that box breathing. Yeah, go ahead.
That's actually one of the things I use when I teach those who are in a tactical situation or in a tactical profession, is we talk about situational awareness all the time. But if somebody says mindfulness, then people are like, oh, that's woo-woo. But that's all that mindfulness is. It's situational awareness of your own situation in the here and the now, what you're feeling in all the five senses, and then what it is you're feeling emotionally in the here and now without judging. So it's a great way of putting it.
And I want to share a story too. I think I've shared this before. I'm certain I have at some point, but I was first introduced to box breathing by another SEAL, Commander Mark Devine, right?
Yeah.
And learned that concept through his work. And to give people like a direct example of how this can work and apply in the field, right? We get a call, the kind of call you like never want to hear, which is 1199 for us in California, officer down. And I work a lot at this time. I was working a large jurisdiction where, I'm a sheriff's office. So like, one end to the other could easily be a 30-minute, 40-minute drive. And this was a long ways away. So it was going to be at 120, 130 miles an hour. It was still going to be about a 10-minute drive to get there. Right. And so of course the whole world is rolling and I'm the sergeant in charge, right? It's my squad. It's my day. I'm it, right? I'm calling the shots on how we do this. And I felt myself starting to tighten, chest starting to tighten, starting to get that tunnel vision. As I'm, panicking about a partner, driving insane speeds in an SUV, right? Like trying to be mindful of my partners and what they're doing and making sure that they're safe. And I kicked on that box breathing. Obviously didn't close my eyes, but I kicked on that box breathing and brought myself down. And what I've known or what I've learned since is, that activates that parasympathetic nervous system to calm us down. And that my vision opened up. I could hear the radio much more clearly. And I did that in the middle of that event. And so I have seen the direct impact of that in a panic situation. Now take that to where you have the time to really process things and how beneficial that can be for you. And it's exponential, right?
Right.
So that I like to share that story because that's a direct application of it in the midst of a crisis. Right. And luckily our officer was fine and everything worked out, but I remember that vividly. I remember I still pass the intersection sometimes where I started the process and still think about it. It's really funny. Really funny.
Yeah, that's an amazing example of how you can take control back of your body. I mean, otherwise you just let that, you mentioned the parasympathetic nervous system, right? The parasympathetic nervous system is what calms us down, but otherwise you let that sympathetic nervous system take over, that fight, flight, or freeze. Your heart rate gets out of control, your breath rate gets out of control. You mentioned being able to see more and hear more because you get hyper focused when that sympathetic nervous system takes over. You get hyper focused on one thing, survival, when quite often what you need to survive, you need to be calm. You need to be able to see more things. So we don't want to turn off that sympathetic nervous system and the ability to tap into that if you need it. But what happens is every day our body sees things as threats that aren't really threats. I mean, email notification, social media, your boss, telling you you have a new deadline. You see that as a threat. Now your sympathetic nervous system is kicked in. Now you're kind of living in that red. If you talk about a race car, right, in the red, if you're constantly in the red, eventually you're going to break down. You're going to wear out. And then that sympathetic nervous system, when you need it to kick in, is going to be worn out. So it's kind of a win-win. If you're able to practice that box breathing like you did, Garrett, regularly, but then also tap into it when you need it, that's when you're going to actually be able to, you are still in the sympathetic stage because you're still going to a downed officer, and you're still obviously driving at high speeds, but you were still able to kind of control it. So you're definitely able to respond rather than react in a situation. Right. And that applies if you're out on the beat and you hear about a fellow downed officer, or if you're, a mom or a dad and I've got young kids and my kids screaming and yelling, I don't instantly assume that they've got a broken arm. I run down and I see what's up, so I don't wear myself out. And so that I don't freak them out. If I show up in that red, in that fight, flight, or freeze state, and I show up with my kids, they suddenly see me freaked out. That just escalates the situation. Now I'm rambling, so I'll turn it back over to you, brother.
No, it's all good. It's I think my practice even this morning as a different example, but with kids, kicked in this morning before we recorded. Now I'm running around getting ready for our interview, and it's summertime, so my son's on his way off to a new camp today. And I could tell something was off right before we started to leave the house. And I wasn't planning to go with them to drop off because, we had our thing scheduled, and I could just tell something was off with him. And I just asked him a question. I basically asked him if he was all right, and he broke down. And there was a time, or there are times where maybe I would not have been as empathetic and open to hearing his concerns, or I could have, blown him off. Oh, you'll be fine. You've been to this camp before, that would be the kind of the closed off way to do that. But being aware, again, just knowing where you are, being aware of my surroundings and recognizing in my son that this was something he was struggling with, made me, in that moment, at least, a much better parent, right, to connect and engage with him on the level that connected with what he was feeling. So there's just so many things to it. And it's both a simple topic and an incredibly complicated one all at the same time, right?
It is.
All right. So I want to go into there's a whole bunch of questions I have, but when we booked this interview for us to talk, it's just coincidental that Operation Red Wings was, happening as, this is the anniversary.
Right.
And that you were, involved in that. And that's, of course, reached mythic status, I guess, as it were. I mean, like you said, it was Marcus Lutrell's book, Lone Survivor, right, and then it was made into a movie. And there isn't, maybe aside from the Captain Phillips story, I don't know if there's a SEAL story or SEAL event that is more well known. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but
Osama bin Laden is probably up there.
Well, yeah. That's true. Actually, that's true. I'm blanking on that one, but you're right. That's top. I'll put that top 3, right?
Yeah. I always get asked, "Hey, were you on that raid? Were you on?" I was not on that raid.
But and so you mentioned survivor's guilt, and I imagine on something like that, extortion 17 and all like that, the the loss of life on that one was, if I'm not mistaken, was the biggest loss of life in special operations history, correct?
For Extortion 17, yeah. So we had Turban 33 for Operation
Right.
Red Wings, and Extortion 17, which happened. I want to mess this date up, and I know it was in August, and I want to say that was in 2011. So that was that was the top loss of special operations. We lost, I think, 32 special operators on that one operation.
Right, but and then you're right on Red Wings. It was just so. How long was it before you noticed that something was off or wrong, or did you just chalk it up to what I think cops do all the time? Is like, that's just the way the world is, and not really, and kind of walling themselves off from that. Where was that?
Sure. So I think it took a while, actually. It wasn't instantly. I flew back with Danny Dietz's and Mike Murphy's body. Actually flew back with a fellow SEAL, Matt Leathers, who ended up dying in a freak freediving accident years later. But Matt and I escorted Danny and Murph back to the States, landed in Delaware. I met Murph's parents and jumped in a rental car the next morning, early the next morning, and drove back to Virginia Beach. And though I had been deployed for some time, I did not drive back instantly to see my wife, which I think most people probably would have done. But I drove to see Patsy Dietz. So this is Danny's now widow. And I went to see her and console her, and actually brought her the flag that Danny had been brought out of the field under. So, they fly back a body bag and they have a flag draped over the body bag. Brought that flag back to Patsy and spent a couple hours with her. And in that moment, I was still kind of in the deployment mentality, kind of. I was still wrapping up this deployment that I'd just been on. And when I was finished speaking with Patsy, got back in the rental car and then drove home to my then wife, who I've since divorced. But and I just acted as though nothing had happened. Got home, hey, good to see you. And then I started thinking about the next deployment. So that's kind of where the switch was. Okay, I'm turning off one deployment and turning on a switch to get ready for the next deployment. Because this next time around, I was going to be an officer in charge, and I had to lead. And kind of what I thought was, hey, good SEALs, turn the last deployment off, don't think about it, and move on to the next deployment, or the workup for that next deployment. And what I didn't know is that last deployment kept coming back in dreams. It kept coming back in fights between my wife and I. Kept coming back in different ways, and I didn't think that it was that past deployment. I just thought it was who I was. I just thought I was dealing with some anger issues, some stress, and some anxiety that I hadn't processed. But I didn't realize that was survivor guilt until years later. And I can't tell you exactly when it was, but at some point I started questioning why I deserved to be around, why I deserved to be around. And these other men who were married with kids had passed away. They were, in my eyes, better operators than me. They were, in my eyes, better men than I was. And there was a lot of, that's when the guilt, anxiety, depression really started setting in. So it wasn't instantly, at least it wasn't instantly in the forefront of my mind. It probably was there instantly, but it was subconsciously. And it manifested itself in anger, anxiety, depression, stress. And then not until probably 10 or 12 years later did I actually process it as survivor's guilt. And once I was able to put a name on it, then I was able to see how it was tied to so much of this other stuff that I was going through, and how that was manifesting itself in myself personally, manifesting itself in my marriage at the time, manifesting itself in my professional life. So it took a while, but I think, like I said, it took a while for the forefront, but it was probably there subconsciously the whole time.
After the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact that so much of my life is out there accessible to the public. I've been trying to figure out where that line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast, on social media, or in interviews I give, and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough worry, but also I felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seemed insurmountable, and I learned that honestly, it is. But there's a lot we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at officerprivacy.com, who are here to help me clean up the internet and the paper trail that is my life. A quick Google search shows a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. Check out officerprivacy.com for more information and learn how you can get started cleaning up the internet. Do you remember your reaction to the first time someone told you you've changed?
Yeah, denial. It was my ex-wife, again, married at the time. She told me that I had changed, and I thought, no, I've always been this way. I've always been on edge. I've always been kind of an angry type A personality, a hypervigilant person. Looking back on it, I don't think that I was always that way. Now I think I had just built in a defense mechanism to convince myself that I had not changed, to convince myself that I was this tough guy that couldn't be disturbed by what I had done on the battlefield or what the loss of my friends had done to me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was denial, maybe even a little bit of anger. Like, what are you talking about? There's no way I've changed. You've changed. Sure. Taking that and placing the blame on her, placing the blame on my coworkers and friends. I was convinced that I was too tough to have changed.
I think for us in law enforcement, the common reaction to that is also it's either denial or it's like you said, kind of throwing it on the other person, but like, well, I've changed because now I understand how the world really works and my eyes have been opened, and you just have the sheep's wool over your eyes, and man, bummer for you that you don't see how the world really is, That's how we often attack it too, because of all the things we see. We don't, it would be there's obviously officers who have lost multiple partners in some agencies, but thankfully it's very rare that immersion in such loss for you. Now I wonder how anyone does move forward, and I think you found the correct answer to that in the way that you've pushed through. You mentioned how this is, we all understand how it, we don't all understand, but I think the obvious implications in our personal relationships are there, right? Marriages break down. We are angry, or we snap at our kids, or we have broken relationships there. Gosh, cops know about that, sure as hell. But what we often miss is our professional lives. And you mentioned that right there. How was this showing up with you professionally? You're about to be an OIC on your next deployment, right, and you've got people that you're in charge of, but also you're in charge of their safety. So many things go into that. How was this starting to affect how you showed up at work?
Great question. And I think it ties to that, oh, you're naive, kind of, I know how the world is. And I came into that next platoon pretty hard charging, because I didn't want the same thing to happen to my crew that I had seen happen to the guys with Operation Red Wings. So I pushed them pretty hard on their training, probably too hard at points, and pushed myself probably too hard at points to where I think I burned us out a little bit. And that anger and stress and anxiety that I was carrying, I was now taking that and pushing it onto my people, and they were starting to feel it and show it themselves. So I think that's how it negatively affected my work. It definitely made me focused, and in that respect, it was good. But I think I may have pushed things too hard. And then that next deployment that I was on, my wife at the time, now ex-wife, she ended up having some health issues, and I had to come home early from that deployment. And because of my pushing so hard for that platoon to be the top that they could be, and then suddenly getting pulled back for my wife's health issues, that actually caused even more anger and frustration in me personally, and then in my relationship. So it negatively affected me personally, it negatively affected me professionally, and it negatively affected me in my marriage. So it was just this downward spiral that I couldn't get off of or out of. So yeah, it definitely started affecting me in more ways than one.
Yeah. I mean, when you started to say that, my thought that came into my head was resentment. You work so hard to get something. Yeah. You get yanked out of it to come home, and now you got to deal with this other thing that's external to you.
Right.
You don't have control over it anyway, because
and nor did my wife, which is, right. And that's the crazy part, right? I felt resentment. I did. Mm-hmm. And this is embarrassing to admit, but I felt resentment towards my wife at the time for her health, mm-hmm. and how it had taken me away from my job and my boys, my men, right? Which is ridiculous looking back on it. But because I have meditation and I know how to live mindfully, and you mentioned that empathy and compassion, how those attributes in your life are enhanced with practicing meditation and living mindfully. Mm-hmm. I think if I'd had those then, I would have been able to process things a lot better. And I would have realized that the resentment that I was feeling was ludicrous, that was not an appropriate emotion to be feeling at the time. So yeah, you're 100% spot on. Resentment.
Well, it's not a stretch for me to envision that either, because I think, so many of us who have had a career, especially early on when you're like the young go-getter rookie, and you want every assignment, you want to work every overtime shift, or you want to work every gang detail or whatever it is, and you get pulled back by the realities of family life, and trying to be present and have some sort of balance. Like, for so many of us, there's no such thing as balance. We're full on the gas at work, and everything else gets ignored. And that, of course, leads to disaster. But at some point you become more aware of these things, and you realize, like, oh yeah, I really did blow off some of my responsibilities, or I didn't get to do, maybe you didn't take assignments because of the family, and that'll eat at you, that you didn't get to, go do the cool gig because you had young kids and the schedule sucked for families, or you didn't test for the SWAT team because your wife was feared for your safety, whatever it is. Like, those things start to build up, and over a 20-year career, 30-year career, you think about all those times where it's just kind of, you've scratched that scab a little bit, and it just festers. And if we're not careful, we end up in that situation where we've just spent 30 years resenting our spouse. And that's a horrible way for anybody to live.
Resenting your spouse, resenting your children, resenting your family. when you look back on it years later, you realize that that doesn't make sense. But when you're in the moment, and as you said, it kind of builds up over decades of a career, that can totally destroy a marriage. It can totally destroy friendships. It can totally destroy your relationship with your children. And when you look back on it years later, is that really worth it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know a job that's worth that. I don't. So.
Yeah. No, there is no such thing, right? There isn't. So, and something else you touched on that I want to explore a little bit, and I so appreciate how open you are about all this. Is you mentioned when you were flying home, and in the aftermath of Operation Red Wings, how you felt that you weren't good enough, that these guys were better operators, these guys were better leaders, and do you still find that to be a true statement? Or was that a narrative you were telling yourself as part of this spiral you were in? Does that make sense?
It does, 100%. I couldn't tell you whether it's a true statement or not, but I would tell you that I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome wherever I go. And I think that was probably the case before Operation Red Wings, when I was surrounded by amazing men, amazing operators. I questioned, hey, did I deserve to be there with them? And after that operation, when I was officer in charge of an amazing platoon of guys, I questioned whether I deserved to be leading those men. Years later, when I was an executive officer, and then in charge of thousands, or not thousands, but like 1,400 at one point, I questioned whether I deserved to lead them and whether or not I was going to be a good leader. But I think the difference in where I was toward the end of my career versus where I was leading my first platoon as an officer in charge was, one, I had gone through these different wickets and I started to see, okay, you know what? I have earned these rights. I have earned this position. I have done well. So I must be doing something right. So that helped for sure. But really what helped more than anything was, again, the meditation and the mindfulness, because as I would sit and meditate, I would realize that this narrative that I had, it was something that I had built up. And nobody in my career had ever come up to me and said, hey, you're a bad operator or you're a bad leader. That was just a narrative that I was telling myself. And it was this negative self-talk had definitely caused that imposter syndrome. But because I was able to do that introspective work and realize that was something that I had built up, then I was also able to work through it and realize, you know what, I am a good leader. I am a good operator. And I deserve to be here leading these men, leading these troops. When I say troops, it's in both men and women. So I think the difference was, again, towards the end of my career, I had those tools of that introspective work, that contemplative work. So I was able to see who I truly was and where I truly deserved to be, and that helped a lot.
I appreciate you sharing that, and thank you. I think I struggle with that too. Anytime you put yourself out there into the world, there's a sense that, shut up and stay in your lane, right? In some way.
Yeah.
And we do that to ourselves. I have kind of a working theory on imposter syndrome that I'm literally in the midst of trying to work through, right, with the same techniques you're using. But I am learning to take it as a sign that you're in the right company. Like if you go into a room, for example, and you're not slightly intimidated by the caliber of the people in the room, then you're probably in the wrong room. Right. And if we go into a profession like yours, or I'm not equating policing to, special ops, but you go into any of these warrior professions, where you're, especially in service, the commonality we always have is service. And if you go into service on behalf of strangers, you find, whether it's special ops or it's just a patrol cop in rural Nebraska, you find a common thread between those people, which is that willingness to serve for others and to potentially give their life for something bigger than themselves, right? And that's the commonality that our two communities have, and that'll never go away.
Absolutely.
And so when you enter a community like that, you are reaching a higher caliber of I don't want to say human, but a higher caliber of sense of self. And we have to sort of work ourselves up to that sometimes. We may not always be we're not going to be the best at everything all the time, but using some mindfulness to say, okay, I do deserve to be here. I've worked hard to be here. I've passed all the tests or whatever, but so have these other gentlemen or ladies, and I'm in the right room, right? And I'm at least starting there. If I were to go, I can't think of an example without bagging on some profession, but I always bag on accountants, I guess. But, if I were to go, I don't know. You get my point. But
sure.
When you join a special community that is committed to service, I think that imposter syndrome becomes very, very real. I don't think there's a lot of people, say working at Costco, bad example maybe, but working at Costco, who are concerned that the person next to them is better than them, that they don't stack up to them. That, what I mean? Like, we all have those things in our personal lives and in our personalities of feeling inadequate. But I mean, that real imposter syndrome, I don't deserve to be here, I think that comes from the communities we're in. I don't know. What do you?
No, I think
tell me I'm wrong.
I think you made a great point. Having that kind of sheepdog mentality, right? You want to protect the herd. You have a sense of service, that higher caliber of service, right? That heart of service. I think you nailed it. I've never really thought about that until you mentioned it. But yeah, I think in a service-oriented profession, and I don't want you to minimize being a law enforcement officer. I think that's a tremendous profession, and there are definitely stressors that come with that I've never experienced. Right, I don't go out and potentially see an armed robbery or respond to a fellow downed officer or respond to an accident where there could be children hurt on the daily. Right, I go on a 6-month deployment. And I know that 6-month deployment is going to be arduous. And I know the workup is arduous in its own way. But I don't have the daily, and then come home from that daily potential stress, and have to worry about getting a gallon of milk on the way home. You guys are flipping the switch on and off a lot more repetitively than we are, where we flip the switch for 6 months, it stays on. And then when we come home, we turn that switch off. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement officers and their families. So thanks for what you do, and for those who are listening who are in that profession, thanks for that. So please, when you mentioned, hey, you don't want to compare policing to special operations, don't minimize that. But coming back to the sense of self, the higher caliber of sense of service, I think you're spot on. I think you do surround yourself with a higher caliber of person, and in doing so, you end up having that imposter syndrome. So you almost bring it on yourself. I've never really thought about it that way, but I think you're spot on.
Well, I appreciate the insight, and to clarify, I'm not trying to minimize law enforcement in this context at all. I'm just trying to, verbalize that I don't know your path, right? As much as you don't know mine, right?
Sure.
So that's all I'm trying to get out of that there. But what's interesting is almost universally we've had lots of SEALs on, We've had Green Berets, like your friend Jason Van Camp was on.
Yeah.
And almost across the board, they identify the same stressors that you talked about flipping that light switch on and off every day, going into hypervigilance and then trying to turn it off just in time to turn it back on again.
Yeah.
And, we had Tom Satterley on recently. Tom was Delta.
Oh yeah. Tom's great.
Tom.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, you cops are the worst. You just, you got the worst situation. You got the worst self-care. You got you're the most hard-headed. Like you're the same as Spec Ops all the way.
Right.
But it's funny because I just mentioned that we've had a bunch of Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Delta on, and again, almost universally, I don't think it's a coincidence. Like those are all guys who are proponents of meditation and mindfulness practices. Mikhail Vega was an early guest on my show who still has had a huge impact on me and his story about being EOD and then going into the teams. And then he's processed his own traumas through Kundalini yoga.
Right.
I probably said that wrong. So, it seems like as you age and you become more open to these ideas because you're willing to try anything at that point, that, many of you and many of us have found these things to be effective. But you mentioned early on the stigma, and you were concerned about the stigma from within the teams. Is that something that still exists in the community from the people that you're aware of, or is this becoming something that's more acceptable and more talked about?
It's definitely becoming more acceptable. And even just within the past 5 years, 5-6 years, since I've started practicing, the questions that exist about these, it's not where it used to be. People, if they found out you were meditating, they walked away from you like you're a weirdo. If you told them you were meditating, their eyes glazed over. These days, when you tell people that, they want to know more about it. They want to know why you got into it. They want to know what the benefits are. I am seeing more and more people meditating and not just meditating, but being open about it. I just finished a book called Transformed by Remy Adeleke. Remy is a former team guy as well. And now he's out in Hollywood as an actor and doing movie producing. But he was born in Africa, in Nigeria, came over to the States, lived in the Bronx, basically joined the Navy to escape going to jail, and then became a SEAL. I'm reading his book, and I had no idea it was going to mention this. I'm just reading his book because I enjoy reading other team guys' books, most of them anyway. And Remy talks about meditation openly and how it changed his life. And so I reached out to Remy recently, and we've connected. Great guy. Highly recommend getting him on the show if you can. Anyway, Remy talks about it. You've got Mark Devine who talks about it. And Mark, I think Mark was one of the first ones to really promote box breathing and just being in touch with your own sensory awareness in the teams before it got big. But I think another side of things, if you haven't read Stephen Kotler's book, Stealing Fire talks about how we may not call it meditation, but we talk about the mind gym in the SEALs and how controlling your arousal is important and how breathing was tied to that. I think that's where a lot of it changed just within the past 5-6 years, is that it's not so much taught initially to deal with stress and anxiety. It's taught in order to find the state of flow and more often and more readily. As a matter of fact, I think I have Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book Flow somewhere around here. Anyway, by accessing that flow as an individual and then accessing that flow as a group, it's taught in the teams to tap into that breath. And now I think once the guys learn that, and then they kind of do some research on it, then they were like, okay, well, this is meditation. It just wasn't it wasn't taught as meditation. So it's definitely becoming more readily accepted in the team.
They got tricked into it.
Yeah, totally. And I did too. I mean, the guy told me that my performance was going to improve, and it did. But not only did my performance improve, my ability to process the pain and the anxiety and the stress and the survivor guilt, I was able to process it better. And I don't walk around life completely zen all the time now. I still get stressed out. I still get angry, but I'm more aware of what's driving that. And I'm able to bring myself back down, or I'm able to identify what's causing that depression and realize, you know what, this is just a state that I'm in. I am not permanently depressed. I am upset and sad about an event, and this is a state of being. And that does not mean Jon Macaskill is broken. That means that I am experiencing something. And then I can come out of it on the back end rather than thinking, oh, I am Jon Macaskill and I am depressed for the rest of my life, right? I'm able to process that and come out of it. And I think that's an important piece and an important distinction to make, is that when we're stressed, that doesn't mean we are a stress ball. It means, hey, we are going through a stressful situation. When we're depressed, that doesn't mean we are depressed for the rest of our lives. It means, hey, we're going through something that would normally cause sadness. So work through it as a state of being in that instance rather, and you can come out of it, and don't beat yourself up for feeling that human experience.
It's become so crucial to me to be able to learn that skill. And I think, for so many of us, we wrap ourselves around that emotion and assume that is us, like you just said, right? Versus, I think you just said it so well, that like, it's not us, it's something we're experiencing. And right. I also think that meditation and mindfulness helps us do that with our careers too.
Absolutely.
My job, my profession, my work is as a cop. For me, it's as a sergeant, right? Deputy sheriff. But I am not just a deputy sheriff, right, sergeant, cop, etc. Like, that is something I do, but it is not me.
Yeah, right? That's big.
It's huge. And I didn't realize for the longest time how important it was to make that distinction. Right. Right. And of course we inculcate that into our culture with, equating career to your identity, just whatever you do. You go to a dinner party and people ask, what do you do? And they mean, what do you do for work? We all wrap ourselves around that, but none of us is our job. We're so much more than that. So
the reason I giggled there, I think we should all strive, when people ask us what we do, we should start telling them what our hobbies are. And, hey, what do I do? I go camping, I run, I read books. Oh, and I'm also in this profession. Maybe that would be a better way of answering that question in the future.
But if we got rid of the social pretense nonsense of it all, right? Wouldn't I know more about you in 30 seconds if you answered it that way than if you told me, whatever your profession was, And so, and on the human connection side, like, why don't we do that? But we do. We wrap ourselves around that, and then we think we have to live up to that as well. I want to ask before we wrap up, like, I can't profess to be an expert in any of this, right? And I emphasize to people too that it's called a meditation practice, not a perfect, because you, just like a sport or anything else we do, your shooting skills, your arrest and control skills, it's a perishable skill. If you don't do it for a while, it gets harder to do it again, right? And so I struggle with that, trying to meditate every day, trying to practice and journal every day. But I'm curious what it is that you have found. What's your day look like, and how have you found success to try and remain consistent?
Well, first off, I am certainly not perfect. Just like you said, it is a practice. There's days, I will have marked off that I'm going to meditate at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my kids get up earlier than they are supposed to, or I don't know, I had a more restless night than I normally have, so I don't wake up as early as I would have liked. So for some reason, the planned 15-minute meditation is now either non-existent or it's crammed into a 2-minute breathing drill like we did at the beginning. It is very much a practice, but ideally what I like to do is get up somewhere between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning. I journal. I spend I'm a Christian, so I spend some time in quiet time with my higher being, and then I spend 15 minutes meditating, and then I do that again. The 15-minute meditation, I try to do that again after lunch. So in an ideal day, I get 30 minutes of meditation. That's the formal practice, but then I also try to live mindfully. So I try to pay more attention. Again, we talked about that situational awareness, right? I try to have that situational awareness of myself. Try to have that situational awareness of my children, my wife, my colleagues, friends. And then, I try to put my tech away for lunch. So I put my phone away, put my computer away, turn my TV off, and I will eat what I call a mindful lunch. So I'm paying attention to the colors of the food on my plate. I'm paying attention to the smells. Obviously, as I'm eating, I'm paying attention to the taste, paying attention to the texture, the actual feel of the food, the sound of eating, and not just eating, but what's going on around me in the moment. But then also emotionally, what I'm experiencing as I'm eating. Am I feeling happy that I'm eating this meal? Am I feeling depressed that I'm breaking down and having hot dog and hot dog and fries instead of a salad? Is there some type of emotion attached to this meal? And I pay attention to that. And I found that by doing that, the meals, and then paying attention to my family, friends, the surroundings, that's living mindfully through the day. If I miss a meditation, then I'm still at least working to live mindfully through my day. The meditation, I believe, sets you up to do that better. You're going to live more mindfully through the day if you do meditate. But if you do miss a meditation, at least make an effort to live mindfully through your day. That's I think the game changer. The two together is ideal, but if you can only do one, at least work to live mindfully.
They don't have to be they don't have to be paired together. You can do one or the other, or even both in an ideal world.
Right.
Jon, really have enjoyed this conversation. Your podcast is Men Talking Mindfulness. That's where they can find you on social media. And then you personally, you're at Mindful Frogman. Where are the other places that where are the touch points that people can find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, it's just Jon Macaskill, Jon Macaskill, Macaskill. That's where I'm most prolific. And then I am on most of the other social media platforms as Mindful Frogman, all one word. And then, yes, the podcast is Men Talking Mindfulness with me and Will Schneider. And we do that. We do that live every Friday, or at least during the season, every Friday on various platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. And then we take that and turn it into a podcast the following week. So season 3 starts here July 9th, and we're going to have some great stuff coming up. So I'd love for your audience to join us on Men Talking Mindfulness.
Yeah, I think it's become like I binged through a bunch once I learned about it. And, and actually it's funny, kind of as we're wrapping up, like we never got to the topic I wanted to talk about today, which was an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I think I'll invite you back right now to have that conversation some other time, because I think there's so much to go into there, but there's such a story, I think there's such a lesson rather in your story. And so I am honored that you're sharing it with us here. This idea of high level imposter syndrome, but also, doing the work that it took to navigate some really, really dark periods, and then being able to understand that you are not the emotion and learning all of that. and being a leader for us of somebody who comes from the warrior communities, who is, sharing this openly so that we destigmatize these things, because, cops are dying every day, just like veterans are, dying by suicide because they won't get help because of the stigma surrounding it, or the fear that they're going to lose their badge and their gun. And if we can destigmatize this from the top down and talk about something as simple as just being aware of your thoughts, there should be no stigma around just being aware of your thoughts, but there is. And we solve that by doing stuff like this today. So thank you so much for your time and your efforts to really bring this out into the community.
My pleasure, Garrett, and thanks so much for having me here to really help that mission and help destigmatize and get these messages out. So I appreciate it.
Well, round 2 will be up sometime soon, and I'm sure we'll have you back.
Right on. Sounds great.
All right, thanks for listening to this interview with Jon Macaskill. We talk about badges on this show all the time: our beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service. It's our 6 steps towards more resilience. If we can focus our efforts on those 6 areas, we can build the resilience we already have, and we can tap into areas of our life that we have yet to cultivate. And Jon is such a great example to me of cultivating new skills, cultivating a new mindset, and identifying what was working and what wasn't for him. When Jon's beliefs about himself, about being a survivor, were challenged, he took action and sought out new modalities to include mindfulness and meditation, among other things. I don't think anyone out there in the world would ever accuse Jon of not having discipline, but the discipline to know that he needed to take care of himself was something internal to him. There's the discipline of going out and getting in your exercise, of going out to the range and working on your shooting, of your dry firing or your jiu-jitsu on your days off, or whatever it is, out of all the things in our lives that require us as first responders, but particularly as cops, the things that we require discipline out of us so often, and the one I struggle with the most, so often are the things that are internal, the things that being disciplined about my own thoughts, about my own beliefs about myself or others, and executing on my own actions, and Jon's goals, he's out there now. His goal in the world is to promote ideas of vulnerability and compassion, and those are not things that you would think come from the warrior ethos, but they absolutely certainly do. And his awareness of emotions, and how he wasn't aware of them for a long time, but had to be confronted with them to rectify that. And of course, a man who's still in service, even though he's no longer in the Navy. He's out there serving by doing his podcast and being on my show and on others, and really appreciate his time. All right, if you, I want to offer you something too that's very exciting for me. I am totally enjoying doing this for people, and I'm getting a lot of great responses from it, and it's absolutely free. We have launched Tactical Tuesdays. It's a free weekly email I've been doing for a while now, where we bring you a few tactics, some tips, some strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. Might be a book I want to share, gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else that I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check out the show notes of this episode and you'll find it there. I promise we won't sell or spam your email address. We just use that to get you on our list. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, if you were inspired by the conversation, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends, people who you think would enjoy this conversation or they need to hear about what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend that they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. Please also leave a comment with your review. It just takes a few seconds. I read all of them. I adjust the show accordingly when I get feedback that's helpful, and it really does help us spread the word about the show. And of course, join us on Facebook and Instagram at The Squadron. Special thanks for our sponsor today, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important to you, and it should be, check out the special offer at officerprivacy.com/the squad room, where you'll get a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up through that link. It's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. Also, there's some great companies who support the podcast and support you as well. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, Ranger Up, Hardhead Veterans, Audible, Officer Privacy, as I mentioned, and Com Gear Supply. And if you're looking for the best fitting ballistic helmet that exceeds NIJ standards and won't break the bank, definitely check out my buddies over at hardheadveterans.com and use the coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your helmet. It's the helmet I use and I carry with me in my car all the time. It is an amazing device that they have really spent a lot of time and R&D on, and it is seriously the best helmet you can buy for the money. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.